Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of In Lay Terms. We have our good friend, Mr. Jeff Colvin, back with us. Jeff, how are you?
Hi there, Payman. Thank you again for letting me come on today. Doing very well. Thank you.
We have some interesting topics to go over today. Up until now, you and I have been we've been talking about this cloud that's been around your previous run as mayor for Chestermere, but now we're going to go into even more detail, so it's going to be pretty exciting.
Yeah, we've had a lot of questions in regards to the current in our municipality and in all the municipalities in Alberta. They're now having elections for the cities and towns, and they'll be on October 20th of this month. And so I've had a lot of residents reach out to me about, one, um, wondering if I was going to run again, and two, reaching out about the current counselors and the things that they've kind of noticed to be odd and wanted to have some clarity, I guess, on some of these things. And they were looking back at some of my old posts, I guess, that provided a variety of evidence that kind of dictated or showed what was really going on at the time. And it's pretty shocking. It's pretty shocking what happens, in the political environment, and really it's really sad, and what shows what needs to be changed. These things shouldn't be allowed to happen, and so we're pushing back against that, and we've launched our own lawsuit for defamation and slander against the government and Rick McIver and a variety of people in our city that were part of this. And because we want to get to the bottom of it, we want to show people how these people can lie, and then how this gets put out in social media, and then all of a sudden a number of people believe that. And it's quite damaging for a society that you're allowed to put out false information. And that's something we went through with Minister Rick McIver, putting out massive volumes of information that were completely false. And we'll talk about some of that today. And some of the silliest ones was, him saying that myself, he'd spread rumors around town that we had somehow been able to steal over multiple millions of dollars from the city. And, he had mentioned that to other mayors in the province of Alberta. And these mayors, me being connected with them over the last 2 years, actually had either approached me at some of the conferences or had phoned me and told me that Rick McIver had done this, and that they were knew it was a lie, knew it was false, because cities don't have suitcases of money sitting around. Everything is done electronically, and mayors, no one person has access to write checks and stuff like that. So you just can't do that kind of stuff. And the other thing was this, that he said that the mayor had stolen 2 motorbikes from the police officers that they were using for as a crime deterrent, that we had started in our council, supporting police officers on adventure motorcycles so they could drive over all kinds of terrain. And he indicated to people that I had these in my garage at my house. And what's so silly about that is that, okay, Rick, where's part 2 of that statement? Did you go get them from the mayor's garage? Did you go get the RCMP to go get them? And so none of that happened, of course. And what's a true sign of the false information that he continued to provide is when his person, Doug Lagore, was put in as the Olive Council, which was a weird thing that he did. That person started a lawsuit for Rick McIver against us when we were running for our by-election, 6 days before the election. And it was just done to slander and defame us, nothing else. But what's interesting is that, or odd, given Rick McIver's claims, is that in that lawsuit, we weren't being sued for taking millions of dollars. We weren't being sued for theft of motorcycles. And you'd think if that was such an important thing that he spread around Alberta, that would have been in the lawsuit. And obviously, it's completely false. Why would I have the city police motorcycles in my garage? It's just nonsense. And so I think what's also important is that while this lawsuit was filed, before our by-election. In the after the by-election, the council that got in was asked if they would to continue the lawsuit. And what's really disappointing is you take a look at these councillors, which are representatives of our community, and they've had a chance to look at the information, and they voted unanimously to continue the lawsuit. And I did have two councillors reach out to me who indicated that it was a farce, and that they were bullied to make sure that they had a unanimous council decision, so that all of council would appear they would be in agreement. And that's something that I think residents need to be made aware of, is that you're really looking for your councillors to be unbiased and honest about what their information that they're getting. And some of that information may be confidential, some of it may be just public. But it's really important that you have the ability to handle the power that you're given. And what I think has been demonstrated is that this council doesn't. And I really think that predominantly most of this council needs to be completely removed. And one of the things that I wanted to show people is that, for example, the lawsuit that the city filed against us, myself and three councillors, our CAO came forward and wrote a letter that she released to everybody. She also signed an affidavit for our court for our lawsuit. And the affidavit, which I'll go through in a second, identifies each one of these subjects that we were being accused of, and identifies that every single one of these was done by the CAO, not done by this mayor or the councillors. The CAO authorized whether they were going to get a carnival, or the CAO authorized whether they were engaging various legal firms for the work that the city does. One thing that people have to remember in regards to legal, the city handles a lot of legal work. And so everything the city does, anything corporate wise, involves legal, whether you're doing subdivisions, whether you're doing complaints or something like that. So it's very normal for cities to have, reasonable budgets. Our budgets in the past for the city were around $600,000 to $800,000 a year. In our term, our budget was only around 500,000. And intentionally, Rick McIver came out and said that all of that budget is related to us. And it's like, Rick, that's a complete lie. And of course, you don't have that dialogue back and forth when he's slandering us in public. The budget is related to city business, like whether they're, again, doing subdivisions with a developer, or you name it, or buying land or selling land or whatever they're doing. That is not just related to what Rick McIver did to us when we were pushing back against him. And so all of these councillors, as I mentioned before, current councillors, had the opportunity to see that. And yet they still agreed to proceed, whether they're being bullied or not. I don't respect people that don't have the ability to stand up, because you're standing up supposedly for the community. And you've got to stand up for what's right. That's the whole point of your position. And so that's something that's, I guess I want to show and identify to people what that might look like. So if I could share my screen,
Jeff,
I'm just going to. Yes,
before you move on, I'll bring up your screen in a second. Can we get a cast of characters? You ran with a slate of 3 other councillors, is that correct?
So when I ran for office, we didn't have a slate, but we did have 3 other councillors. Surprisingly, it was actually more of us. There's probably 4 or 5 of us that ran on similar concepts, that we wanted transparency in government, that we wanted to have, reduction in taxes, these kinds of things. So a lot of our council identified with that. And when we first got in, a lot of the council kind of was talking in that same direction. Surprisingly to us, though, 3 councillors were moving in a different direction. And we didn't know that at the time, because they were doing it behind the scenes. And so the other 3 councillors that were working diligently toward, moving the city forward and trying to reduce our expenses, et cetera, was Councillor Blaine Funk, Councillor Stephen Hanley and Councillor Mel Fote. So those councillors were working hard day in and day out to try and really identify the challenges the city had, which we had a lot of issues with the way that processes were being done and procurement was being done, and really the lack of transparency was the biggest concern, and the staff was fighting us, not wanting to give us transparency. And I didn't understand that from a board perspective. I've been on boards before of companies, and the board has access to anything that they want, and so they're provided with information to, if there's a concern or an issue, they're provided with that information easily. And so our city staff at the time was not willing to do that at all, and they were blocking us every step we took. And it was very frustrating. It was very frustrating. We even were trying to open up a simple road in Chestermere, North Rainbow Road, and our staff had told us that this road was a goat trail, that it had no pavement, no asphalt, no nothing. It was all dirt. And I went and took pictures. Chestermere is a small town, so I went and took pictures of it, and I came back and showed council and staff that here's our paved road with a top lift. Here's our paved road with curbs. And what you said was completely a lie to council. And I didn't phrase it that way in council, but I just showed that we're not being told the truth. And so we then proceeded to open that, pass a motion to open that road, and then have our citizens being able to use this road for better access and better transportation. And what we were doing initially was, this road was, part of it was gravel. And so we had upgraded the road to allow for it to be oiled and whatnot, so that it could withstand the traffic. What we didn't know at the time was what volume of traffic would be used on that road. And when we then figured out that it was very popular, we then had to maintain that road. Basically every 2 weeks, we had to use a grader to grade it so it didn't get potholes and stuff like that on it. And then we passed, in our budget that we had a budget to approve the road to be fully paved, which was costing us about $1.5 million to $1.7 million. And then when we were removed, that never happened, even though it was in our budget, which was frustrating. And so now this council has come out, and they have a budget for, I think it's $3.5 million to do that road. And I just shake my head. It's like they stopped all of the transparency we had achieved in our procurement. And now they're back to, we're going to double the prices of everything and not show people how this money is being spent and how it's being, the trades that are being chosen, which is where government wastes all of our money. It's all wasted in the procurement process and in getting too expensive of projects, which is really where kickbacks lie. And that's how the kickbacks occur. So that's something that we were trying to push against significantly. So while we were in our, go ahead.
I got a couple more questions. What year was this that you ran?
So this was in 2021, October. So the end of 2021. Okay. And we were removed by Rick McIver from office December 4th, 2023.
Now, I assume that anybody that if they're running for municipal council, their names are public record. There's three other councillors that ran. Can you share their names?
So the three other councillors that ran that we were having challenges with was Shannon Dean and Ritesh Narayan and a gal named Sandy Johal Watt. And for some reason, these three were against us from the very start. And we showed evidence how they had actually been meeting with the city's lawyer about, I think it was about 10 or 15 days after we were elected. And in that, they were having conversations about how to remove us from council, how to have an inspection called, how to go through a variety of steps. And so the problem with that, is that one, on its face, obviously they shouldn't be doing that. But it gets more serious than that, is that a councillor is not allowed to meet with the city's lawyer. That can't happen. That can never happen. The city's lawyer meets with the CAO and the mayor or all of council. So you could never have a situation where where a lawyer meets with a councillor individually, and the city's paying for it. They're allowed to have their own lawyer, of course, but so the next part of that is the city paying for it. So it's illegal for the councillors to spend money that's not approved by council. Okay, and so they can't just willy-nilly decide to go do this, and they did, and the lawyers should not have allowed that. So there's questions there as to, how did the lawyer get paid? They confirmed those three councillors confirmed that they did not pay legal fees, and so that proves that they didn't pay for it personally. And there's a conflict of interest if they did have that lawyer as their lawyer, anyways, because he's the city lawyer. So that just goes to show you that this was all a scheme that was being done. And what was so disappointing is that we joined and ran for office to honestly help the community. These people ran to simply attack us, and as they did in the first 2 weeks of office, which is just really disappointing. And what's really shocking about that is we had two inspections done, one by Rick McIver getting a fellow by the name of George Cuff to do an inspection. And then we had one done by Deloitte. And both of these were initially welcomed. What was shocking is how they covered up information and how they slanted information to not be accurate and to be hearsay. And I've never experienced an investigation which is based on no proof, no evidence. And it's shocking that various public members don't have the ability to discern the differences between what's hearsay and what's actually factual. And that's something that we're dealing with in our slander lawsuit that we have filed. So these three counselors, we call them the rogue counselors, but so we found out that they had submitted to Rick McIver at Municipal Affairs a variety of false statements, complete flat out lies about what was happening within the city. And I'll go through some of that here. And we didn't find this out till after probably 4 or 5 months into it, after the inspection had been called by Rick McIver. And we also found out, unfortunately, after that, around that same time period, that Rick McIver's brother-in-law was the previous mayor. And so that was something that was pretty frustrating too, because I had asked Rick, I had written him an email about he should recuse himself because he's got a conflict of interest. Because we were looking into, there was allegations that the previous council had been involved in some things that weren't done properly. And so we were looking into those. And so that in itself is a conflict for Rick McIver to be connected with the previous mayor in any capacity. And he wouldn't recuse himself. He wanted to make sure he stick handled this to the end.
Jeff, do you want to load up the RCMP document, and then I'll share the screen?
Yeah, sure. Here is so this if you can see this. This starts off with legal advice that was being done here in February 2022, only to our counselors, Ritesh Narayan, Shannon Dean, and Rich and Sandy. And what starts with this is that you can see that this is very concerning, as I discussed already. And you can see here from Councillor Narayan on March 30th, 2022. And this is before the inspection was called. You can see that they're having meetings with the city's lawyer. And again, this is completely not allowed. And so these meetings occurred. And then we have a situation where the RCMP started to get involved. And this started to, look really, really shady. So we had a situation here where the RCMP, and again, the councillors aren't authorized to deal with the RCMP in any official capacity, okay? unless council authorizes them. So no motion of council was provided to him. And you can see that they're having a conversation. And then oddly enough, he then connects Deputy Minister, Assistant Deputy Minister of Municipal Affairs, Gary Sandberg, wanted to have a conversation with him, but they didn't want to have anything in writing. They wanted it only to be on their phone, and this is also his personal cell phone as opposed to the government cell phone. And so why would Gary Sandberg, the Assistant Deputy Minister, be having a conversation through a councillor to the RCMP in Chestermere? Okay, and this is February 1, so this is way before the election. Sorry, the investigation was done by George Cuff. I'm just going to go forward here. Just let my computer catch up. And I'm just going to move on to, so we had an incident that came up in March where our 3 rogue councillors tried to fire our CAO. And they came up with a fraudulent scheme that unfortunately had gone through the RCMP. So I'm just going to skip through this part and just get to this email here, where you can see that this is Shannon Dean. So Shannon Dean is the current mayor of Chestermere, and he's up for election right now. And part of the reason that is important to see is that this is why you don't want these kinds of people in office, because they're incapable of telling the truth. And so here you have a situation where this was sent, if you can see the email below, it came from the RCMP, and it was sent to Shannon Dean at his Camp Chestermere address. So why would the RCMP send an official document to his Camp Chestermere address rather than his City of Chestermere address? Furthermore, the RCMP should not be sending documents to the to the councillor. They should be sending it to the mayor, or they should be sending it to the CAO, because they're the head of the city. And so what's interesting is you can see here, it says from the RCMP officer, it says, check out who the author is on the city budget document. And that was sent to Shannon Dean and the dates are important, on March 29th at 9:53 a.m. So then later on, we had a council meeting, and Shannon Dean and Ritesh Narayan brought forward what they claimed was information showing that this CAO should be fired. They told us that the CAO was breaching confidentiality and sharing SIN numbers of employees, payment, salary amounts of employees, their personal addresses, all this stuff. And when we were in council chamber, they said this to us. And so we said, okay, interesting. That sounds really bad. Can you please provide the documentation that they've been sending around? Do you have a copy of it? And they said, yes. And so we then waited, and they ended up sending us a document. Now you can see here the subject matter of this document in highlighted says copy of CPO Fire 2022 operating budget comments for Mark. Mark is the CAO, and it's an Excel spreadsheet. So you're kind of like, that's kind of interesting. That's not what I expected. And then you notice in the document that Councillor Ritesh Narayan sends to all of council, including the mayor, he then changed the document. He changed it from the copy of CPO Fire 2022 operating budget to document breach. So that's fraud. So now you've done something that you've manipulated the document that you're now representing and sending to an official body, which is all of council. And this was something that, so when we got this document in council, Councillor Hanley and I were able to go through the document properties and identify that this was a document that was actually created from the city of Chestermere. And in the document, in the Excel spreadsheet, it had all the complicated formulas. Like, it's kind of archaic, the city's still using this, but it's all long drawn out formulas that are in each cell in the Excel spreadsheet. Anyway, so we determined that this is not a fraudulent document. This is not a document that shows SIN numbers. It had nothing to do with that. It was a budget document that showed the budget for the operations department. I mean, it's confidential in the sense that it's confidential, a city document, but it has nothing to do with SIN numbers, staff payments, their personal addresses, all this stuff these people represented to all of council. It had nothing to do with that. It was complete farce. And we brought that forward, and we said to them, we said, what are you guys doing? Why have you guys come forward and you're attempting to have this CAO fired? And their perception was that, from my understanding, was that they didn't like this CAO because they felt he sided with us too much. And he didn't actually. He was a good CAO. He was very challenging and very smart. And he did what he thought was best for the community operations, which is in charge of roads and fleet. And he had a background in that for 30 plus years. And he was a very smart fellow. And so it was kind of comical that these guys were willing to do this. And it was shocking a bit that you're willing to commit fraud to allege something to get somebody fired. And so, we told them, we said, this is way offside that you guys have done this. And then right after, because we had in the.
What did they say when you said it was way offside?
Well, Shannon Dean had gotten upset that he was a part of this, and he had walked away from his desk and whatnot, and he was trying not to be kind of in this environment anymore when he realized we busted them, and that this was a complete fabrication, and they were just silent. They really just tried not to have us talk to them anymore about it, and it was very uncomfortable, to be honest with you, because it was like, I can't believe you guys would do something like this, and why? Like, I get it, you want to get this guy fired, but you think we would agree to something like that without evidence? And it's a serious accusation, so we have to go through the evidence. And that's one of the things I'm saying, is that this current council didn't do that, which is really sad. Our job, we have to take it very seriously. When somebody says something about somebody or something, we then go, okay, great, let's dig into it. Let's go find out what the documents say. Let's see if it's being misinterpreted or interpreted correctly, or there's something that's offside about it. And this council didn't do that. And to be fair, there was the two councillors that came to me that told me that they were bullied into doing this. So they did recognize, I guess, that there was false statements in the lawsuit.
Sorry. So you mean Ratisha and Sandy were bullied by Shannon into for this?
No. So the new council after the by-election has, apart from Ritesh, has 5 new councillors. Ritesh Narayan is still a councillor, and Shannon Dean ran in the by-election to be mayor and won. And so those people in the new council bullied some of the new councillors, 2 of the 5 councillors. And those 2 people came to me and told me what had happened. And so we plan on, in our lawsuit against these people, because we're suing Shannon and we're suing Ritesh and we're suing Sandy. Those people I'm going to bring them as witnesses in this to show the manipulation that these guys have done again in this lawsuit. And these other councillors, what's so disappointing is that they have a job to do, which is to be unbiased and then use their best abilities to come up with, a solution that might fit. And so just like we did when we said, I got to see that information before we can just jump ahead and just go fire a guy based on your representations. And they turned out to be completely made up and false. And so that's what I expected this new council to do. And this new council did not do that. So I don't believe they're worthy of being elected. And there's an election going on right now. And these councillors and Mayor Dean, these people cannot control power. They don't have the ability to handle the stress and not manipulate the situations and lie about it, which is wild, which is just wild to me. And so,
Jeff, a couple more questions. 2021, we got Shannon Britisha and Sandy, they're the road councillors. Did any of these three, were they part of the previous council before you came in?
So Ritesh Narayan was an incumbent. He was part of the previous council as well. So he had a vested interest in blocking us to look into a lot of the corruption or alleged corruption, and a lot of the things that weren't making sense. We had a lot of projects that just didn't make sense from the way they were completed, the way they were constructed, and the amount of money they cost. And a lot of residents don't understand how government can steal money from you, and how bad actors, I guess, is the better way to say it, that can steal money from the cities. And procurement is the way that happens. And so when you have a construction company, you can either have what we were told actually after we were removed, which it doesn't matter, we put these people on notice, but is that we were told that some people in Chestermere and some of the councillors and some of the senior staff from past councils had set up a company to be a intermediary, and so the procurement would go through that company, and then that company would then subcontract it to the actual people that do the work, and they would then make that lift, and the city would make sure that company got that contract. And unfortunately, we were told that right when we were removed, by one of the staff members that had been there for the last 15 years. And so eventually we feel that we'll get to the bottom of that, because in our actions, we'll be able to question these people and, begin to get a better framework for what's happened. And I've heard that there's some other lawsuits that are coming from unrelated to us, people, about what's happening in Chestermere. So, I think that it's unfortunate that it's had to get that way, but Chestermere has been the playground for too many corrupt people for too long, and that needs to stop. Like my taxes tripled in about 2013, and that's incredible, 300%. And so that's one of the reasons why we were able to cut taxes. We cut taxes 30%, and in the year that we were removed, we were aiming for another 20%, based on the budget. And so cutting taxes 40-50% is an unbelievable thing. Like, how could you do that? And we didn't cut services. So that's what really makes you wonder what's happening with all of the money that people are putting in taxes. And it's a very attractive for the wrong people to try and get into office and to get access to these pools of money, because they can manipulate the situation to get those funds somehow to get out and go to the wrong places. And we had, numerous examples that we showed of that corruption, from the past that had happened. We had a bridge in Kinenberg that came out at $10 million. It was initially quoted at $4 million. And we had a developer come forward with the evidence. And Rick McIver, the RCMP, wouldn't do anything about it. And this is a $6 million kickback, is what we were alleging. And just to show you, we built a bridge. So when I was in office, we built a bridge across the same canal that this other one is on. And it cost us just over $4 million. And this was, time-wise, would have been six or 7 years later. So that shows you, well, one, costs didn't skyrocket. How the heck could $10 million be the number, right? When we're doing it for $4, which was the actual quote. So they had 3 quotes on this bridge between 3.7 and 4.2 million, to get it done. And so it just shows you the amount of corruption that's going on. And these councillors did not want us to investigate this stuff. And quite frankly, we weren't looking to investigate it ourselves. We were looking to, find this information and then pass it off to an investigator so that I could go back and do my job. And we, as a council, we actually passed a motion to hire an investigator. And that is, and here's the motion actually. Can you see this on your screen?
Yes.
So this is a motion that was passed very early. This was in the first, I think this was in the first 3 months of our in office in March, I think. And this was a motion for the city CAO, which is the city director, to hire an investigator to investigate security breaches and other irregularities. And so this person was hired by the CAO to do investigations into all of these things and various irregularities throughout the city. Rick McIver has come back on us and said, "Council, you guys, well, I shouldn't say council, myself and the 3 councilors hired an investigator and to do something, and it's wrong, and we didn't have council approval." And it's like, well, number one, we did not hire them. Number 2, the CAO hired them, and number 3, council approved it. So, this is pretty silly what these guys went and did. And so,
how do they? When he says that council didn't approve it, you guys have like a record of the vote, or is there no record?
Yeah, I mean, this is what this is. So this is our record of motions, and it shows the motion number, which is 219-22. Shows who moved it, who provided the motion. It was Councillor Stephen Hanley. And then it shows the vote. It was 4-3 carried. And it says in favor, Jeff Colvin, Mel Fote, Blaine Funk, Stephen Hanley. Opposed. Interestingly enough, why would these 3 oppose an investigator coming to the city? Shannon Dean, Sandy Johal Watt, and Ritesh Narayan. So, and they actually later put out a letter into the we have a small newspaper in Chestermere called the Anchor, where they lied in the Anchor article about what they said in this discussion, I guess, or whatnot about this motion. And we passed that article on to an investigator and wrote a code of conduct against that for them to investigate it if it was a breach. And they came back and said it was an absolute breach and that they lied, that it was false information, that they did not say. They tried to say that they wanted to, I don't remember exactly, that it was the process. They wanted to make sure that the person was independent or something like this, or followed. And it's like, that's not what you said. You asked if it would follow the hiring process. And of course it follows the hiring process. It has nothing to do with us, by the way. Council doesn't hire these people. The CAO does. So we can't interfere with their process either. So it's just wild how the government, says these things. And maybe what I can do is maybe go back to the main screen, and I'll just simply look up and show you where the lawsuit indicates what I'm saying.
While you're doing that, Officer Joseph Stubbs of the RCMP, is he just happened to be the person that got the email when the 3 councillors reached out to them with that fraudulent document, or is Joseph Stubbs somehow related to the previous mayor and council?
I don't believe that he's related. Weirdly enough, there's a lot of shenanigans around this guy, and he was part of this, and then he was also part of having those backroom conversations with the deputy minister, and only on cell phones, no paper trail, and and then all of a sudden he was removed, and it was almost like a midnight move. He'd been here for, I don't know, 10, 12 years or something like that, and then all of a sudden he was removed out of Chestermere by the RCMP after this information had come out. And I thought that to be just very odd, and why he was why he was a part of this kind of stuff, like why he would. I don't know that he knew Shannon before this. I'm just surprised that he would breach protocol like that. And we spoke to the RCMP about it because we provided them with the evidence. And they said that absolutely he cannot do what he did, cannot have these conversations with the deputy minister. He cannot have these conversations privately with the councillor and sending city information around. He can't do that. And we said, okay, well, he did. And so we tried to get them to do something about it, but they obviously did nothing. And so, that was pretty sad. If you look on my, if you look on my screen, so this is the city lawsuit filed against us, and you can see in green how they indicate that
Jeff,
the
Jeff,
yep,
I think you skipped a step. You were removed, and then they put in an interim administrator, and then Rick McIver leaned on that administrator to bring a lawsuit against you.
that's correct. And so he originally placed this. He was called an administrator. This person, Doug Lagore. We had filed investigations that council had passed a motion, a duly passed motion to investigate a number of things, which involved RCMP corruption or alleged corruption, also involved some of our auditors, and then some of our councillors. And this is some of the stuff that I wanted to go through today, how they were trying to manipulate the situation, trying to talk to city lawyers, trying to talk to city IT, third-party departments, trying to talk to the city bank, and trying to get the city bank to call the city's loans. And so we wanted an investigation into all of these things, as well as some of the projects where we had alleged corruption. Within 20 hours, 20 of us passing a motion, Minister Rick McIver, who's the brother-in-law to the previous mayor, who was a part of some of these investigations, ordered that this administrator come into office in Chestermere, and one of the first things he did was terminate that investigation. Even though that's supposed to go to a third-party investigator, we were using a law firm up in Edmonton. They terminated it so nothing would happen and to stop it from happening. And
did you figure out how he found out within 20 hours, or did you inform him of it?
Well, we did it publicly in a council meeting because we were trying to be very transparent. So we wanted everyone to know what was going on. We didn't want to hide things. And so we did it publicly. We had it in record, and it went so far. This part is what I find unbelievable. Rick McIver ordered the city to delete that entire council meeting and delete any record of the investigation documentation. And it's like, what are you talking about? You don't have the authority to do that. If you want to disallow something, if the MGA, Municipal Government Act, says that you have the authority to stop something, fine. But it still happened. It still is history. Well, he absolutely wouldn't stop. He actually threatened the staff that they would be fired. And I don't know how the heck he would fire staff. Okay, he can fire elected officials. But anyways, nonetheless, he threatened that he would fire them if they did not terminate these videos and to show that this never occurred. None of this data was allowed to be in public.
I got to stop you, Jeff. Like, do you guys not have media in Alberta? Did nobody pick this up? Did Daniel Smith not even feel ashamed of this? This guy's just coming in like a wrecking ball.
Well, and that's pretty questionable. So we did to speak to the media about this, but oddly enough, the media would not cover it. And you're like, here's a guy who is completely stamping all over a city's rights, transparency, corruption, pursuit of justice. Like it's incredible that the media would not cover this because it's absolutely factual and they can see it. It has nothing to do with me. They can see that it actually happened. And so unfortunately, the control of the media that is apparent is I didn't believe it before I was in office, and actually finding out that this is true and how they're controlled is so disappointing. So disappointing how naive you can be about how the world works, I guess. but I don't
So,
think it's right.
do you want to go back? I see some figures here. Do you want to explain to us what we're looking at?
So what we're looking at, this is page 5 of the lawsuit against us that was filed again seven days before the election. And as you can see in green here, it talks about the defendants or any of them authorize the expenditure of city funds to pay for internal investigations. So again, they talk about how these investigations weren't allowed. All right. And it's like, again, we didn't do it. The CAO did. And the CAO was authorized by council to hire an investigator to do this stuff. So anyways, this is some of the stuff that we do in our defense against this. And we filed a demand for particulars because all of this was garbage. And the demand for particulars just showed exactly that they had nothing. And so we then filed a statement, or filed a action to dismiss the action. So we're going through that right now. And then in the meantime, we filed a slander lawsuit and defamation lawsuit against all of these people, so that we can prove that everything they've done is lies. And we finally we'll get them under oath, and we'll get them on the stand, and we'll be able to go one step at a time, word for word, and show that these lies are real.
Jeff, now
Yep.
I remember last time you and I were talking, you mentioned that the RCMP was considering arresting you for putting listening devices across the city. I'm reading this. I'm just briefly skimming this. I'm seeing the word surveillance. I'm seeing
Yep.
sweep. I think I saw listening devices somewhere. A hidden device detector. This is almost espionage language. They're accusing
Yeah.
you of basically being a spy. Is there any truth to this? Like, what's going on?
No, so the very first one where you see 17A, that talks about a sweep that was done in the city. So that one was, again, this was not done by us. This was done by the CAO. And that one was more innocent in the sense that there was complaints that people were hearing when we were in council in camera, which is what they call is a confidential meeting of council. And so nobody's in there. Except for councillors and sometimes CAOs and ledge services people. We had citizens that were outside of council chambers being able to hear somehow on audio devices what was going on inside the council room, even though it's supposed to be quiet and confidential and all that kind of stuff. So that one was related to that. So that had nothing to do with, that was just a normal business thing that they wanted to verify what was being told to them. And then the next part, though, the part B, was a more serious investigation or sweep. That is where we uncovered a plot by the RCMP to arrest myself and arrest the CAO and arrest the IT manager. And this was accidentally disclosed to us by way of an email accidentally sent to the same person in the RCMP that had the same first name as one of our people in the city. And, just by luck. And so they got this email, which showed a situation report and how they were going to arrest us for all these lies. And we then took that, and it was like a little shocking, to be honest with you. We then took that to the Crown prosecutor through our lawyer, and the CAO did. And he should have been knowledgeable if they were going to arrest the mayor. And he said he knew nothing about it. And he said that first he didn't believe us. And then we showed him the documentation, and he said this is completely offside. So far offside. And he told us that we through our lawyer, he told us that we need to hire this firm to do a sweep immediately, and that we had to be out of the building, and so they did that. The CAOs booked the company to come do the sweep of the building, and all people were out of the building, and so they proved that there was nothing in the building. Then we later found out that what they were referring to was the IT manager had bought two cameras for the city's server room, like where our computers are held, and was going to mount them in the server room as security, right? And the city has cameras that are around the lobbies, the hallways, all of those kind of places already installed long before we got there. And so this is what they were going after, was these two cameras that they bought that they were going to put in the server room, and it didn't ended up working actually for the server room, so they never ended up installing them. But this was the garbage that they were trying to do was slander and defame us by trying to get us arrested, so that we would have that black cloud around us saying that, oh, you got arrested for whatever garbage they would make up. And of course we would never get convicted because it never happened, but it's the abuse of power is what's shocking. How the government, working with these counselors, working with the RCMP, could totally abuse all of their powers to make innocent people look guilty. And this is something that was very shocking.
Jeff,
We went public with that.
This is beyond abuse of power. Like if some CBSA agent dresses me down or RCMP clubs me, that's abuse of power. This is a criminal conspiracy. Somebody went to the RCMP and they told them there's two IP cameras that they're planning on putting in the IT room on the server rack. How can we use this? They had like a brainstorming whiteboarding session. They're like, here's how we can get Jeff Colvin. That's what I'm seeing with 17B. Unless the people in the RCMP are like legally, by the definition of the law, legally retarded and they can't function in society, somebody must have known that they're breaking the law with 17B.
Well, and the Crown prosecutor confirmed to us that they are not allowed to do it this way. And so he was very concerned about what was going on. We actually showed this to we filed an ACERT report, which is an investigation into misconduct by the police. We also met with the Minister of Justice and the Minister of Emergency Services, filing a complaint showing this information and the situation report and from the RCMP and the email that they accidentally sent to us. And we were advocating at that time because the province was saying that they were looking for replacing the RCMP for I guess city police forces. And so we had indicated to them at that time that we had not been looking at replacing our RCMP until now. And we said, we believe that this is dangerous. We've got the RCMP willing to make up information and completely abuse their power and authority, which is very dangerous because you don't want to find yourself in the wrong place at the wrong time in the middle of the night somewhere driving down a road, and all of a sudden you get pulled over and it's their word versus our word kind of thing. And I'm massively against the RCMP in Chestermere now, and what we're going to do about it is something that's being discussed now, but it's so disappointing. It's so disappointing that these people would go to these lengths to try and convict innocent people. Never mind the mayor. If they can go after a mayor for nothing, they can do that to anybody. And
this guy, he reminds me of that cop, the police commissioner from The Godfather, corrupt police guy.
Well, yeah, it is. No kidding.
Jeff, I only budgeted an hour and a half for this meeting. I have to go soon, but I got a couple questions. Do you know off the top of your head the name of the Crown prosecutor and the Minister of Justice at the time?
Oh, geez. Minister of Justice and was Mike Ellis and Mickey Amory. And then the Crown prosecutor, it was my lawyer who spoke with him. It was the city lawyer, our lawyer. I'd have to try and ask the CAO or look back in my records and see if I have his information.
How many years would you potentially have gotten in jail if the RCMP was successful?
Well, you know what's scary about this claim is that surveillance is moves to a federal crime, and so you now fall under something that is not the same as provincial. So the potential for you to not have been released after you've been arrested. So when you're arrested, you're not convicted. Okay, so you're arrested, and then you have an opportunity to, get defense and then defend yourself. In a federal crime, it's much more serious, and they have the ability to restrict your rights incredibly. And it was very disappointing and scary to see how these people could manipulate a situation, a simple situation that I wasn't involved in even. Um, these cameras for a server room, who cares? Nobody's supposed to be in there anyways, right? Like it's a server room of very confidential information that needs to be remain confidential and has nothing to do with mayor and council. But it just shows you how these people have the ability to put anybody's name on the list and target you. And it's shocking and to kind of understand how close we got to having that situation occur with us.
Yeah, I think the one takeaway from this episode for the audience is what Mayor Colvin just said. If they can do it to him, they can do it to anyone. You're not some criminal or some gangster.
Well, and what's so shocking is that like our one counselor Shannon or Ritesh Narayan, he had attempted to get our city third-party IT company to stop providing us access. When I say us, I meant myself and the other three counselors. And you can see here's an email where he's talking specifically with them and claiming that there's some kind of privacy and illegal activity going on for them to call him on his personal cell phone. And it's just massively offside because that's illegal and he doesn't have council's permission. Okay. And in this situation, which is the last one I'll leave you with, is that here he tries to upset Chestermere's financial stability. One guy trying to upset the entire city because he tried to get TD Bank to terminate our loans and call them. And what ended up happening, I had actually spoken to the bank manager, because this is not your local bank manager in the city. Okay, this is downtown Calgary. They handle tens of millions of dollars of loans only, no small loans. And I had talked to him, and he indicated that he'd asked for them to terminate their loans. And I said, I was like, that's just incredible. Then he was like, but we don't put any stock into it. He tells me, and this is politics. And I said, but it's inappropriate of you to spoke with him. It's inappropriate of him to have contacted you. He is a counselor. He does not have council authority. He needs to be a CAO, the mayor, or by direction of council. And what ended up happening, unfortunately, is that we had our, which I had called after I found this, but we had our bank line of credit called for the excess amount. So the amount that was borrowed, they didn't call the loan, but they canceled our ability to borrow any more. Okay, which to a city that could be very devastating, right? They transferred our accounts from Calgary to Toronto to problem problem accounts, and yet the city of Chestermere had never missed a payment in its entire life, and had more assets than its borrowing in investments. So how bad of a risk is the city? And it just tells you the kind of crap that these people, how much they were trying to undermine what we were doing to try and show people what was happening in the city. These scams that had gone on, these kickback schemes that had gone on, the investigations that we were trying to do. And so these people, this person, Ritesh Narayan, is still running for council this term. And so is Councillor or Mayor Shannon Dean. And these people, as you can see in this, they speak for themselves. These documents are like, you do not have council permission to do this. You're completely outside your authority. And what was most amazing was that Inspector George Cuff And Deloitte and Touche never wanted to talk about any of this stuff. Yet they talk about all these other silly things, yet these are real breaches and real illegal activities that you're not allowed to do. And yet they covered it up. So it is pretty shocking that this kind of stuff happens. And I've got many examples of this kind of stuff that, people need to see that these are real things. This isn't something that's made up by Rick McIver and Municipal Affairs about us and people believe it. These are real things that these people actually did with pure evidence. And yet these
Jeff,
powers are covered up.
you and I, we've been talking for, we've talked 3 times now, and we've been talking for several years. And it just blows me away that every time you come on, you tell me something worse about your story. And I'm thinking like, wow, my city's not that bad by comparison. I'm glad to
Well,
stop complaining.
yeah, unfortunately, most cities I don't think are transparent. And I'm a citizen first. And so I ran for council to represent the people. I don't feel that we were being represented properly. And so the transparency, it's the people's right to know everything. They should be able to see every document possible because we are working for them. It's their documents. And so that's why I was so moving towards, I guess, transparency on a granular level. That there's so much corruption going on. These people are breaking the rules so badly, and I just think it has to stop. It just has to stop. And so, I've been asked to be a part of different levels of government, and I'm not sure what makes sense for that right now. I think what makes sense is to expose the corruption. Rick McIver was fired from Municipal Affairs minister, and he's now the Speaker of the House or something. And then he's retiring. So, these people need to be held accountable for what they've done. And there's many people involved, and that's what needs to be shown is that, this is important because they're taking our taxpayers' dollars, which are 30 to 50% of what the taxes you're paying are hogwash. And, that's a stark reality that people need to realize. And we were outperforming every previous council before us, and yet we were saving money like gangbusters. So when they cut our line of credit, yes, it was upsetting, but we said, well, we've saved in the first half here over $6 million, and to us that's a lot of money, because our line of credit might have been I think they cut 10 million or something like that of it.
Jeff,
And so
I got to run. I got another podcast coming up, but I just
okay.
for the audience. Colvinjeff.com is where they can learn more about you. I'm assuming they can get in contact with you there, and they can find out how to come meet you and how to support you, and hopefully how to get you back in as mayor.
Oh, well, thank you very much for your time. And I appreciate it's important to get this information out and show people what's really happening behind the scenes.
All right. Well, I look forward to our next episode, which I can only imagine what you're going to tell me on that one.
Thank you very much for your time. Have a great day.
Right. Take care, Jeff. Goodbye to the audience. Thanks for watching.